Hey guys, welcome to Executive Espresso. We have a show in store for you guys today. I have my friend Dr. Lockwood off of X on X. He is at Dr. Lockwood, and I'm about to introduce you to a guy that's going to help us dissect the real fuel of entrepreneurship, beliefs, how they're formed, how they fail, how to fix them. And so, welcome to the next 18 minutes, and I'm hoping this is going to fuel you up for the weekend. And Dr. Lockwood, he is a clinical psychologist. He's a cognitive truth teller. He breaks down those distorted belief patterns and often, helps people refuel their tank when leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs are sabotaging themselves and may find that innovation has stalled. So together today, along with you guys, and we'd love for you to join in. There's a chat function. Just drop your thoughts, drop your questions in the chat, and I'll be glad to pull those on screen. But today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the psychology of belief. Why is it so powerful? Why does what you believe really construct, really form your reality? And really, what is the pivotal role in business, creativity, personal resilience, and relationships? And so today we're going to dig into why it is really belief. Passion is good, but passion is fueled by belief. How to identify some of those sabotaging thoughts, what's some of the neuroscience of forming beliefs, and why we get so sabotaged with distortions, how to recalibrate some of those, and hopefully leave you guys with a really powerful cognition first mindset that you can use to really rebuild belief in your daily life. And Dr. Patrick Lockwood, welcome. It is so good to have you here today. Give us some more information about your background. What do you do in your day to day?
Thanks for having me. So, I am a bit of an entrepreneur myself. I'm a consultant. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a professor full-time at Cal Lutheran University. So I do a few things, and my main passion in life is to help people improve if I can. And so, as a consultant in particular, as a business consultant, I've tried to use what I know about the mind, about clinical psychology, about cognitive psychology, motivation to help people either live in their role better or find a new role, or at least trying to live in their beliefs better. Because what you're saying is 100% true. My experience both working with patients, but also mentoring students who are future professionals and helping people as a consultant is you've got really smart people who are otherwise talented and capable, but either they have limiting beliefs, which is a phrase you hear a lot, or their values and their behavior don't align. So, like when you do ACT therapy, for instance, you talk about how values are driving forces for behavior. And when we are actually engaging in behavior that's contrary to our values, we tend to self sabotage, have extra anxiety, depression, things like that. And so these are the kinds of things I focus on with people. And the beautiful thing is, it's not exactly rocket science, but it takes a lot of trust in yourself and trust in for the process and the people who are mentoring you and things like that.
Yeah, it really interests me how really, really smart people think really, really dumb, sabotaging things. I've always wondered why
Mm,
that is. I think there's a bit of a
mm,
bias that if you have a high IQ, you're really immune
mm.
to
Yeah.
thinking sabotaging things. Do you find that trap a lot that people kind of sometimes can, as my dad used to say, be too smart for their own good?
Oh, absolutely. Some of the smartest people I work with have the most kind of neurotic anxiety about themselves because they're lost in their thoughts and they're not working with them, for instance. And so there's not a good collaborative relationship with the self, is one way of saying. And so kind of helping them develop that is my goal.
Where do you think that those sabotaging beliefs come from? One of my favorite terms I've heard 20 years ago was stinking thinking. Where do you think that gets started? Different people I find blame different, blame that on different etiologies. Where do you think the main areas those tend to come from?
Yeah, I think in my experience, what I've seen is some people have these limiting beliefs based upon childhood stuff or maybe abuse or something of that nature or bad relationships they've had. Some people develop these problematic beliefs about themselves because maybe they have some diagnosable illness and they don't know how to understand it or make sense of it and live with it and work with it. Other people I've worked with They just are so bombarded by negativity and the negativity biases in our brain and the negativity biases that are built into us, but are reinforced by culture, social media, propaganda in the news, and all these things. And so, like, you can be an otherwise smart person, but if you think the planet's going to explode tomorrow because of climate change or because of the war in Pakistan or something like that, then, what is the point really? Right. So I think all of those things can happen to people.
Well, why do you think that they're so hidden? Why, people come to you, they come to me, and often the response I get is a bit of a epiphany that I'm even, the patient, the client, that they're even having these limiting beliefs. Why do you think that they're so invisible to most people?
I would imagine most people, it doesn't make a lot of evolutionary sense to be that insightful and that self-aware. Like, I think if you look at the long history of humans, most of us didn't have to be super insightful or self-aware to survive and get our genes into the next generation. And so, therapy culture as it is nowadays for the last 30, 40 years is kind of a radical change towards self-awareness and self-understanding that wasn't super valuable, I think, at the like genetic scale of things, is what I think.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense because if you're in a state of fight or flight, which innovators, entrepreneurs, business owners,
Yeah.
parents, for heaven's sakes, usually are, you just don't have a lot of time to look deeper at and use this insight that you're talking about. So
Right.
from a survival perspective, no, it doesn't make sense to be sitting around trying to figure out how am I looking at this thing wrong,
Right.
this conversation inaccurately, this new business venture of making a wheel round instead of square. If a
Mhm.
Tyrannosaurus Rex is chasing you across around the mountain, so I think that one of the things that modern life has gifted us with is an ability that most of us don't use, and I think you noted it, and that is insight, and that's what
Mhm.
folks like Dr. Lockwood and myself do is try to help people,
Mhm.
hone that spotlight of their attention in on something that's going to make your life even better. But speaking of that, one of the reasons I wanted to have Dr. Patrick on here is I love his critique of our profession.
Mm.
I love when he takes on and challenges the psychological ivory tower. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, if you don't mind, putting
Yeah.
yourself in the spotlight. What do you
Yeah.
think that our profession gets it wrong? Some of these things.
Yeah, I think our profession gets a number of things wrong. So I think number one, I think there's an emphasis that everyone, or at least there's this idea that people are supposed to be healthy that I think is really problematic, believe it or not. And the reason I believe that is because some people are in genuinely terrible circumstances, right? Like I call it on my podcast, life sucks disorder. And so if you've got a bad case of life sucks disorder, your mood should suck and your thoughts should suck and you should feel bad and you should be bombarded by your feelings and your thoughts, basically. If you're in the middle of a war, if you're in the, whatever it is, right? Like pick your example. Some people should feel bad. And this idea that they're supposed to feel better in the midst of horrible circumstances makes no sense to me. Another thing that I think is really bad about our profession is that we emphasize certain symptom changes over like the whole person becoming a better person, which I think is like, I get that evidence-based care is this way and measurement-based care is this way, decrease symptoms of anxiety and depression, whatever scale, but like there's a person there and that whole person has a whole life and we're just like probably the biggest sin of our profession is we completely forget the body altogether. Your sleep, your diet, your sex life, your consumption of caffeine and other drugs and food and the gym, like all these things. For some reason, graduate psychology programs, except for I think mine does a good job of this, but most of them just completely ignore the body. It's if only the neck up is all that matters, which makes no sense to me because you're a person, you're a living thing. You have to move and do things, right? So I think those are some of the big cardinal sins. Another one is assuming that like everyone needs therapy, which is obviously not true, you know.
Yeah, that's too bad. It's going to reduce our pay. I see problems with paying my bills with that mentality. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Yep.
The other thing that I tell people is you don't need a diagnosis to get therapy. Just
That's
because you
right.
go get therapy doesn't mean that you have to have a diagnosis. But then
Right.
insurance mandates that you have a diagnosis before they pay for the therapy, which then engenders people that do what I do to try to, come up with some diagnosis that might be billable. And so that's just a mistake. Hey there, William. Hey there, Jane. Good to see you guys here today. William loves the conversation. Says it's awesome. I agree. Wonderful conversation, guys. We're only going to be here for about another 10 or 12 minutes, and we got to get out of here. But we'd love to have questions in the chat. But
Mhm.
are you talking about a more holistic or whole body approach? And what would
Mhm.
that look like? If somebody came and sat on the proverbial therapist couch, what would they come away with under the approach that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that one of the simplest things almost any clinician of any degree level or training level could do is just ask very thoughtful, open-ended questions about basic lifestyle and bodily needs. So, like, how are you sleeping? And how's your diet? And are you working out enough for what you think your needs are? And, have you been to a doctor recently and gotten your blood checked? And just kind of simple things that all you'd have to do is ask the questions and get them thinking about it because you want to send the signal that these things are important. It's not our job to tell them what to do necessarily. We're not personal trainers or physicians or whatever it is, but you know, the idea that like we're only going to focus on core negative beliefs alone, separate from everything else the person is, right? I think is absurd to say the least.
I agree. I agree. And I think that the medical community, physicians, I think that they have the same weak spot is they will
Hmm.
treat a diagnosis, but treating a diagnosis is not treating the person.
Correct.
They'll treat diabetes, they'll treat hypertension, they'll treat even insomnia, but they don't treat the person. And normally it's with a pill. If you have insomnia, well, then
Hmm.
I have a pill for you. I would say, why don't we look into why we have insomnia? What are the driving factors for insomnia? And
Hmm.
you can take all the pills in the world, but if you're going to sleep or trying to go to sleep with this thing in your face, well,
Hmm.
maybe you could just get rid of this an hour before bedtime. I mean, I know, perish the thought. I know you
Yeah.
believe your survival is at risk if you don't have this in your hand.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
almost like people have become amputees because they
Mm.
only have one arm now. The one arm is always dedicated to this thing. But
Sure.
yeah, I believe in the. So it's really refreshing to hear that at your university that you're taking a deeper approach, and
Hmm.
that is so very different from even, gosh, probably even a decade or so ago when in my
Hmm.
field and your field, we really didn't treat a person. We just treated a diagnosis.
That's right.
Well, one of the things I want to talk about are the mechanics of how people are looking at themselves
Hmm.
because I believe that how you look at yourself today is in a very deep way going to dictate your ability for success tomorrow, next weekend, next year. So,
Yeah.
what would you say are some of the driving factors of this thing that people call imposter syndrome?
Mm. Well, I think that's a tricky one because I think there's two things that people are talking about mistakenly together at the same time. So there's actually being brand new at something, which is different than imposter syndrome. So if you're a first year trainee, like I supervise some trainees, if you're brand new, you should be anxious and unsure of yourself and confused or seeking feedback and guidance. And that's not imposter syndrome because you're brand spanking new. So that label doesn't apply to you. But if you're 10 years into practice or 15 years in your career like me, and you're still doubting, can I get up and give a lecture? Can I see this patient with depression? And I'm having like real imposter syndrome where I think I don't belong here. That's imposter syndrome. 15 years into it, doing what you do, like that doesn't make any sense. And that's what I consider imposter syndrome. But if you're brand new, be brand new. It's okay. Like, in different types of Buddhism, they have this thing called beginner's mind, right? Like
Ah.
there's a mindful way to approach the fact that you're brand new to things, but also even as a more experienced person, you can bring that attitude into things. And so there's something useful about, being a beginner if you're not letting anxiety be the driving force of being a beginner. And I think that's the problem with imposter syndrome. It's anxiety.
No, no, yeah, that's right on point, man. I'm right there with you. What I was thinking there, not to interrupt, is about be a beginner. I think that is wonderful, wonderful guidance. And I ask myself, why would I think that I'm going to be a level, 10 speaker,
Mm,
public speaker, if this is occasion number one, two, three, four, five?
exactly.
One of my favorite books, I think it was called Tipping Point,
Mm,
and the point it made is that no matter who you're talking about, whether it's a computer programmer or a runner or a musician or whoever, there's really a bit of a watermark,
mm,
a level of practice they have to get to before
mm-hmm,
they achieve mastery.
mm-hmm,
And I think what Dr. Lockwood's talking about, and I really love this, is why would you expect to have less anxiety before you get to that level of mastery? But once you get to that level of mastery, and then you start doubting your skill set, that becomes the problem.
right.
I would give guys maybe consider this other definition of what your brain is doing that promotes anxiety is your brain is hypothesizing,
Mm,
your brain is being curious, your brain is
mm,
taking an active role, your brain
mm,
is cranking and grinding the gears. And when your brain does that, there's going to be some effects of that, and the smoke of that
mm,
would be anxiety. But that's not a bad thing. Imagine not having that and thinking
mm-hmm,
that you're a master level speaker or musician on day
mm-hmm,
one, two, three, or even 30, where you're
right.
going to embarrass yourself. But thankfully, if
Yeah.
you can consider and be curious about these things and put them in a useful mindset, think of them in an accurate, realistic, healthy way, then that's going to sculpt what you're doing.
Mm.
What advice might you have for a entrepreneur, innovator, business leader who is kind of early on in developing their company or their product when they start having some of these, these beliefs that don't really serve them well?
Mm. I guess selfishly, my favorite piece of advice is to find a mentor because my experience has been I've had really good mentors in my life that have helped me get here so far. And I've also been a mentor for a number of people. And I cannot tell you how gratifying it is just to be someone's mentor. But like, whether it's like a friend who can be a mentor or a paid consultant, whatever it is, do that. But beyond that, be okay with being a mess. Because I think if you're going to be a good business person, a good new business person, you're going to have to struggle, and struggle is normal and it's okay. That's what I was saying about life sucks disorder, right? Like being a brand new entrepreneur is unless you got like a shit ton of money coming your way for no reason, that just like whatever it is, like you are going to struggle. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to not know what's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to doubt yourself. You're going to doubt the experience, but you have to have those core values I talked about that are driving your behavior. Like even the most mentally ill people, even the most evil people in movies and stuff, those are values driven people, like all the bad guys in all the comic book movies like Batman and Superman and the Avengers. Like these are all Thanos has principles that is driving his behavior. That's a principled person who dominates the world and destroys half the population. So like you could do amazing things when your values are in alignment with your behavior, or you can do terrible things, but you'll be wildly successful if you do. And I think when entrepreneurs lose sight of their values that's driving their behavior to create this product or start this business, that's when they struggle and they don't push themselves through difficult circumstances, money issues, staffing issues, personality issues. And that's what you have to remember.
I love
Yeah.
that because I often refer to Amazon, who believes in, based on their founder, Bezos, staying consistent with his values, is
Hmm.
failure is always part of success. You're not going to have
Oh yeah.
success without failure, but you
Hmm.
can decide how you're going to fail.
Hmm.
You can decide that it's okay to fail small instead
Hmm.
of failing big. It's better to fail small now than fail big later.
Oh
Even
yeah,
dating is experimentation. My
that's right.
wife and I dated, for 7 years before we pulled the trigger. And so we
Hmm.
failed in many, many small ways, but incrementally forward. So if you're going to fail, accept that as part of the process, but fail incrementally, small degrees, but always fail forward. And I love what
Hmm.
Solaris had to say, dare to fail greatly. Yeah, I mean, because
Hmm.
eventually, there's going to be big consequences at stake. By the time,
Hmm.
like in marriage, you have a long-term relationship, you have in-laws and outlaws and kids and relationships. And so, yeah, you're really working your way up to the
Hmm.
prospect of potentially failing big, but you're ready for that. So
Hmm.
when I first started speaking publicly, I spoke in front of, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 people. And then I worked my way up to speaking in front of thousands of people at these big shows and everything. But I was ready
Hmm.
for that. I was ready to fall flat on my face. And on one occasion, by the way, I risked falling flat on my face because I didn't have the proper technology to connect this computer to the casinos. I was at a casino speaking in a conference room, and I just didn't have it, and so I had to ditch the whole electronic presentation
Hmm.
and just use the workbook. But see, I was ready for that, and I was able to decatastrophize in the
Hmm.
moment. And the
Hmm.
funny thing is I remember that engagement that didn't go so well initially. It wound up going well, but I
Hmm.
don't remember all the others that didn't go well. What do you think is the value of that? Remembering your failures versus forgetting your successes.
Yeah, I think if forgetting your failures is useful, my opinion about why it's useful is remembering your failures allows you to establish in your head where your responsibility lies, right? What you're capable of, because like failure is when you miss the mark based on what you're capable of,
Hmm.
right? That's what real failure is. You're not failing when there are outside circumstances beyond your control, right? You're failing when you have some capability, some standard, some principle you're not living up to, right? But if a catastrophe happens, an asteroid hits the Earth, that's not in your control. That's not failure. That's just a bad case of life sucks disorder again, you know?
And I don't think, yeah, I think I would look at that instead of saying that's failure, guys, look at that as adaptation. So,
That's right.
what I'm hearing Dr. Lockwood say, and I love it, is there's a difference between failure. You could have done something about it, but you didn't. You didn't prepare. You didn't take proper action versus adaptation, where you're just working to survive and, make lemonade out of lemons. Guys, we're about to wrap it up here, so if you have a question, put it up there. Jane had a question about, I love what Solaris had to say, life is all about adaptivity. Yes, Solaris, I think the greatest part of life is about adaptivity. I believe from an existential philosophy perspective, if you if you remove a person's opportunity to
Mm,
be adaptive, then wouldn't you be removing a large part of the reason to live to begin with?
that's
You
right.
know. So Jane, before we get out of here, guys, Jane has a question. So many believe we will be manipulated by AI. That's
Mm,
interesting. And I
mhm.
think that really sets us up for Jane's other question she asked earlier. What power or do we have power over such things as attempts to manipulate? What do you say, Dr. Lockwood?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one because what you choose to feed your mind is completely up to you. Now, obviously, these algorithms can be very powerful. So, if there's the correct number of bots with the right algorithm, you might find yourself more sucked into it. But what I would always encourage people to consider is why are you feeding your mind anything? Because for the most part, we don't really need to look at anything on our phone. There's almost nothing of real substantive value. Like, I love my YouTube channel. You do great work. However, do they really need to watch this? Right? No offense to any of us, but like, what do these people actually probably need to pay attention to? It's probably the real life things like their pets, their family, their friends, the gym, their job, their spirituality, whatever it is. Like, so many dozens of real life here and now things that are way more important than anything on a screen. So my hope for people is that they can combat the bots by just going and living a really good life. That would be my
Wow. I could not have picked a better way to close out our conversation. And look at it this way, possibly, is that the main course is real life. The main
hope.
course are family, friends, pets. Man, my pet Scruffy, he was just as much a part of the family as anybody else. And
Hmm.
focus on the main course. Everything else is junk food. I'm not against junk
Right.
food. You know, I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
a good honey bun or a
Oh,
double
yeah.
decker moon pie like anybody, but focus on the main course. The junk food ways we spend our time is always something that is negotiable, and we should negotiate it. Let folks know how they can get in touch with you, Dr. Lockwood, and where do you put most of your content?
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel called The Psychology Checkup. Feel free to follow, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I post a new episode. I go live actually every Saturday afternoon. And then
What time is that on Saturdays?
usually around 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so
Okay.
feel free to come out and chat if you want or comment, etc. And then my main source of connectivity is my website, lockwoodconsultingsolutions.com. And most people find me on Twitter or X at Dr. Lockwood.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Guys, we appreciate all you guys being here. Thank you very much, Solaris. Thank you for your questions. And Jane, I love the quote that William had, recursive iteration loop error. Yeah, yeah. What a
Mhm.
wonderful concept there. Hey, guys, we'll be back next Friday with another Executive Espresso. Before then, we will have our longer form conversation Monday at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time. Gosh, if you're Pacific Standard Time, Dr. Lockwood, that would be 5 a.m. for you, but I think I'm 2 hours ahead of you. And
Yeah.
then today, here in about, 2.5 hours, we're going to have Freaky Friday on X, an X space, which is just an audio space talking about love and horror
Mm.
stories and fairy tales and psychology of love. That's coming up here in about 2.5 hours. Join us then. Have a great day. We'll catch you next time, folks. Bye bye now.